Hello economic rockstars. I'm going to be looking at how to do a simple linear regression. I'm using Excel 2011 for my Mac. Because I'm a football fan, I'm going to use some statistics based on last year's English Premier League. We're going to analyse the relationship between two variables, goals scored and the points accumulated for each team. So it's common knowledge that in order to score more points, you need to score more goals. So we're going to test out regression and see the relationship and how strong that relationship is. And then we can use that as a means of forecasting future seasons. So teams may want to buy better strikers. So let's have a look at last year's standing, 2014, where Manchester City won the league. And we notice by eyeballing the data, the fewer goals that you score, the fewer points the team receives. Now, what we're going to take a look at is analysing this relationship and doing up what's called a scattergraph, which visualizes the data that we have in the table here, and then we'll calculate what's known as a regression equation. And that regression equation will give us some insight into how this data can be interpreted. So first things first, we need to highlight the data or the variables. We don't need the name of each of the coordinates, just the variables will do. Go to charts and scatter, and this will be the same for Microsoft Excel. And the reason why we're choosing scatter is we're seeing how these coordinates relate to one another in the diagram. So as we expected, we see the relationship where we have higher goals scored and higher points, and fewer goals scored and fewer points. And the coordinates plotted here on the diagram actually show that relationship that we have here. Now, note that we need to call these variables by a certain name, and we call them a dependent and an independent variable. It's common knowledge that in order to score more goals, we get more points. Therefore, points depend on goals scored. So points will be your dependent variable, and goals scored will be your independent variable. And a dependent variable is given the letter y, which will also be on the y-axis, and the independent variable will be given the letter x, which will be on the x-axis. So we can format this chart just to make it more aesthetically appealing. And I suppose the first thing to do is to get rid of the legend, and we may as well get rid of the grid lines too. So we just go to chart layout, click on grid lines, and we'll remove the horizontal grid line. I'll give my axis a title. So the horizontal axis, remember this is your x-axis, and that will be for your x variable, which is the independent variable. Likewise, we'll do the same for your vertical axis or your y-axis. And this will be your points. It's always good to change the heading. I'm just going to, for this example, put in Scattergraph, but typically a more detailed title will be required, such as the relationship between goals scored and points accumulated for the Premier League 2012 or for the Premier League 2013 to 2014. Now, this scattergraph will typically identify that relationship that we have between the two variables being studied. In order to find a regression equation, and the regression equation is typically given is of the form y is equal to a plus bx. And again, we have the variable y and x in there, so therefore points depend on x. But we have an a and a b coefficient. These are known as coefficients. A is your independent coefficient, and an independent coefficient indicates that y will equal a when x is 0. So in this case, if a team did not score any goals, the points accumulated will be the equivalent of a, which we'll find out soon in our when we do the calculation. And that's again possible in football because you could end up with a 0-0 draw with another team, therefore accumulating 1 point. And b is your slope coefficient, indicating how much of an influence goals scored will have on points. And we'll see that soon enough when we actually do the regression equation. And this is straightforward enough if it's not required for you to do any calculation. So we just right click on any of the data points, go to add trend line. And once you've gone to add trend line, here we could go to options and display equation on chart and display R squared value on chart. So I'll just drag this. So notice now we are given our regression equation. So I like the way the equation is written. Y is equal to a plus bx. Excel writes it as y is equal to bx plus a. So I'm just going to put in a first, the value of a first, noting that it is positive and noting that b is also positive, so I need to put in my plus sign. And now I can get rid of that part. So this is the regression result for the Premier League 2013-2014 season, indicating that on average each team would have received 9 points even though there may have been 0 goals. And for every 1 goal scored here, if we put a value of 1 in for x, the points would increase by 0.8376. Now the R squared here, this is known as the coefficient of determination, and this determines how much of an influence goals scored does have on points. In this example, this can be expressed as a percentage, so 80.275% of any changes to points is due to the goals being scored. The R squared is also useful in identifying how strong the relationship is between the two. The maximum value this can have is 100%. Alternatively, we could look at the correlation coefficient, which is represented by the letter R. And I'm just going to do a calculation below here. And R is the square root of R squared. And we have a value of 0.8959. We don't express that in any unit of measurement. It's just expressed as a gauge from 0 to 1. And the closer it is to 1, it means that there's a strong relationship between the two variables, which is quite plausible, suggesting that the relationship is quite strong between points and goals scored. If this was closer to 0, there would be a weak relationship. Given that it's quite close to 1, we would expect the points on your scatter graph to be close to the line as well, which in this case they seem to be. So that's an example of simple linear regression using a football example. Check out the next video. I'm going to look at the current standing of the 2014-2015 Premier League. See what the goal scored is there for each team. And we can find out whether that has any predictive outcome for who wins the Premier League come May. So thanks a lot, and don't forget to subscribe by clicking on the Economic Rockstar logo.